stages or winning a jersey but for me, and I've thought long and hard about this, Ryder Hesjedal, the Canadian, that ride he did on the pavé, I thought was fantastic. He got caught in the end, but he held off, really, the master of pavé. The Saxo Bank guys, he held them off for quite a while. He got caught in the end, but then he lost two of his main players, Christian van der Velde, Tyler Farrar, and he stepped up to the plate. Really, their tour was in tatters. He stepped up. Not only did he go in breakaways, but he still managed a top 10, 7th overall, and he's a big guy. I mean, he could ride the pavé. He got over the mountains. He time trialled well, and he moved up some placings in the end. So, for me, that was right of the tour, because Contador, Andy Schleck, Cancellara, all of these guys, we expected them to do what they did, whereas Hesjedal, no one would have picked the rides that he did. Okay, he didn't win any major prizes, but he is a guy that I think now Garmin will say, hang on a minute, we've got a guy here who's done top 10. Maybe we need to put some focus on him for the Grand Tours.
Well, Alberto Contador making his way back onto the podium. I think this will be for first, second and third place. Correct me if I'm wrong, Rube.
Putting pressure on me again, Tomo, as always, but I think certainly it's first, I can tell you that. 100% first. It
is first, second and third, and look, special mention must go to Andy Schleck. And, you know, if you're looking at turning points in this race, surely that drop chain incident must be one of them. But I go back to the prologue when Schleck lost 60 seconds on his rivals. Hard to believe, but an 8.9 kilometre prologue, that's how long the course was, can make such a difference in a race that runs for 3,600 kilometres.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. That prologue, you know, obviously was vital. It always is vital, though. I think every rider knows that when they're coming in. So, you know, I also think another important ride was Schleck's ride on the pavé, on the cobblestones. I mean, he got time on Contador there. So once again, it's always ifs and buts. Are we listening to the right anthem?
A very stirring moment in the life of Alberto Contador, listening to the Spanish national anthem on the Champs-Élysées here in the capital of France for a third time. And I tell you what, that was pretty stirring. You know, it's been such a wonderful 4 weeks for Spanish sport, and when you take into account Rafael Nadal's victory at Wimbledon, the World Cup, the Spanish national team just last month, and now Alberto Contador, they are just extraordinary sports people, aren't they, the Spaniards?
Well, look, aren't they? And I mean, they've had a fantastic year, and Contador's just topped it off for them, hasn't he, really? I mean, it'll be celebrations. He'll be having a big thing of paella, I think, when he gets back to Spain. And, you know, a bit of sangria, and and then he'll be off to some post-tour crits, I suggest.
I was going to say not just paella, you know, but it's going to be interesting. What's the next big thing that Spain's going to win? Are they going to win the World Championships in Melbourne?
Well, probably. They've got a very good team, haven't they? Let's just touch on that, actually. That's a very strong team that they've got. Not to mention the Aussies, of course, on home soil, and the Italians, traditionally very good at World Championship level.
Yeah, I mean, all those teams you mentioned there, they're going to be absolutely hard, exceptionally hard teams to get into. You mentioned the Australian team. I mean, there wasn't that long ago where they had to try and find recruits for it. Now, you've probably got 20, 25 guys who you could put in any one day, and we've got the variety of riders to suit every permutation as well. So, absolutely going to be a really hard team to get into. The Spaniards and Italians as well, as always.
Well, and if you look back, say, 10 years ago, and I make reference to the Olympics in Sydney, you know, one of the biggest events, home soil makes a huge difference, but we weren't quite ready then to take up the challenge to the European teams. Now, I think the Aussies have got a serious red-hot go at this, at taking home the rainbow jersey. And I think Cadel Evans lives just down the road. We've got an Aussie in the rainbow jersey, first one ever for professional cycling. I'm going to pick that we're going to take a double. We're going to take two Aussies, and one of the Aussies, Simon Gerrans, who we had a few moments ago, I think if he can get himself right for the Worlds, he could be the one.
Well, we're looking at the podium for the 2010 Tour de France. Alberto Contador, Andy Schleck and Denis Menchov.
Únicamente dar muchísimas gracias, ¿no? a todo el mundo, ¿no? Porque me han mostrado su cariño en todo momento. Ha sido un tour muy complicado. Ha habido momentos en los que a nivel físico pues igual no he estado todo lo bien que me gustaría, y a nivel psicológico también ha habido momentos muy complicados, ¿no? Ha sido un tour especialmente difícil, he sufrido muchísimo para conseguirlo, y la verdad que no puedo expresar lo contento que estoy. Muchísimas gracias a todos, que habéis hecho que todo sea...
Alberto Contador there, speaking in Spanish obviously for our Spanish audience here at SBS, but I think he basically said, Rupert, that this was a very complicated race, a very hard race, and one I think that he's probably happy to get over and done with.
Yeah, I mean, last year's race was obviously very complicated for different reasons with his internal rivalry with Lance Armstrong. This year it was complicated from a purely sporting aspect, and he was the guy who was the defending champion. He was the guy who had the pressure on him to sort of dictate how the game will be played or not, fairly or not, aggressively or not. And at the end of the day, he came out the winner, and by 39 seconds, the fourth smallest margin in history. You know, that shows that Andy Schleck did take him on, and they both of them set up a fabulous battle. And I think also due credit to Dennis Menshaw for the way he fought for that third and fourth place, Sammy Sanchez as well. That was the second race. It's almost like the great undercard fight that you've got in a world championship fight. And those four guys gave us a really brilliant tour. And while, you know, for Australia it's a little bit disappointing without results, the Aussies rode very well. I've done a report card for the Sydney Morning Herald about that, and they've done better than most people may realise behind the scenes. But you've got to give credit now to the people who are on the podium, and you know, thank you very much for a fantastic race.
Dave, you spoke about your favourite rider of the tour. What about the most underwhelming?
Yeah, well, look, I think for me, I think that the big expectation, and it came from the start of the year, Bradley Wiggins, he transferred from Garmin, he was under contract, he got out of his contract, he went really arguably to the world's biggest budget team. They had high hopes on him, fourth last year, and really he's failed. I think he was in the 20s, 25th or 20th. So I think for him, very disappointing. He said himself, he said very disappointing, not good enough. Now they've got to take stock and they've got to think about, okay, where to, how do we rebuild next year? As for them as a team, though, I think they've made a good presence here at the Tour de France. Geraint Thomas, he's a star of the future, that guy. I mean, we saw him across the pavé, and then, of course, wearing the white jersey almost for the first week. So Wiggins, though, I think a fair bit of pressure on him, I think, in the next couple of years, because I'm sure he's on a very large contract with Team Sky.
Well, it's never a Tour de France without seeing Lance Armstrong on the podium, and somehow he manages to squeeze his way onto this podium in 2010, Rupert. But I think it's appropriate because this man has done so much for world cycling. He's globalised the sport. He's globalised the Tour de France, and if it wasn't for that man, I feel that perhaps our audience back at Australia wouldn't be seeing as much coverage of the Tour de France as they are right now.
Oh, certainly, Tomo. I think, wherever Lance Armstrong's gone, there's always been a story. I mean, it's sometimes been a divisive sort of story, but either way, he's left an impact on the sport, and obviously through his Cancer Foundation, he's doing a lot of great stuff there. But I think Armstrong's earned his place on the podium here. He did. While he didn't, he got punched out of the race, with the crashes and the punctures and stuff. He had to sort of regroup himself. That was a new challenge for him, and he did it very well. He had some very strong rides, particularly at the back end of the tour. The Col de Tourmalet, I thought he had a fabulous ride, and just the other day as well.
Yeah, look, I've got to agree with you, Rook. The last couple of years, I've been lucky enough to interview Lance. We've seen him at Tour Down Under as well. We've been fortunate enough to have him in Australia. I love him. I think he's fantastic. And I think that you're dead right. It was a key moment when he lost all that time. Tours shot to pieces. And he said, no, I'm going to pick myself back up, something I've never had to do before, and finish this Tour de France and finish way down the standings. Not really care about the general classement, but I'm still going to have a crack. And I think it's fantastic what he's done for the sport, what he's done for cancer research and the foundation that he has with Livestrong. So, I think the sport, if only we can have another Lance Armstrong come along in the next few years.
Well, the history books will show that Lance Armstrong won a stage at the Tour de France, his first stage back in 1993. I mean, I can remember what I was doing back in 93, Rip, but I was wearing shorts and long socks. I was probably still at school. I'm only joking. But that's a long time ago. Think back to 93. What were you doing? And he's still here on the top podium of the world's greatest bike race. Just extraordinary.
Yeah, well, I remember '93 when after the Tour de France, in '93 he went and won the World Championship in Oslo, and that was a very, very special day. To me, it's the greatest one-day race I've ever covered. I remember that day completely when he attacked at Oslo on the descent down this in the rain, and guys like Miguel Indurain, and the whole bunch of superstars were chasing him, and they couldn't chase down this young nipper. And he crossed the line, beating his chest and really ramping it up, and it was a great display. But little do we know that, 99 minus 93, that equals 6 years later. He'll be winning the first of 7 tours and creating history. I mean, fabulous story.
All right, let's just talk about the Australian.